This reading asks, you got the time? Joe Zadeh's Tyranny of Time is a really interesting one, and I love the image of the guy who wanted to blow up time. I kind of think about that every single time my morning alarm goes off. How about you? Joe Zadeh's article, A Tyranny of Time, is an interesting one for me because it's a concept that most people don't normally think about. Time. The only time I think about time is when I'm late for something, or when I'm early for something. I used to think about time all the time in the days before streaming when I'd have to wait for something good to come on TV, but this is something that you've probably never experienced. But time is something that's really worthy of us talking about. The first thing Zadeh likes to draw a distinction between is natural time, which is regulated by the sun and the cycles of the earth, and regulated time, which we now determine by atomic clock. Yes, this is an atomic clock. I don't get it either. I don't see the dials, but this is what keeps normal time for us. And it's regulated by how fast electrons can decay. Not really the thing I want to organize my day around, but this is how we do it. The advantages of having a constant, precise time is that it is very easy for us to adapt our lives to it. That might be one of the downsides as well. Zadeh argues that the biggest thing that moving towards a mechanical understanding of time has done for us is given many people a method of control. The exact quote, "The mathematical construct of coordinated time has been shaped by science, yes, but also power, religion, capitalism, and colonialism. The clock is deeply politically charged, and like anything political, it benefits some, marginalizes others, and binds us from a true understanding of what is really going on." Now, this wasn't what I thought they were going to build to when I saw the article title, The Tyranny of Time, but this is a very typical way of analyzing cultural products by bringing politics into it. When we think of politics, we tend to think about people running for office, but politics in this sense is about power. Anything political benefits some, marginalizes others, and binds us from a true understanding of what's really going on. Politics, if it's about power, yeah, it's going to benefit somebody, and it's going to marginalize others. How does this show up in our actual real lives? Well, if you have a job, most likely you're going to be subject to a time clock. Your time coming in and out of work is regulated, and your money you get for working is regulated. The benefits of your labor are regulated as well by a very precise time clock. If you take college classes, yeah, unfortunately, like this 8 o'clock class I had last semester, time is very much something that's going to determine your existence and how you can behave. It's not just you have to be here at time, but are you going to go out at midnight on a day where you have an 8 o'clock class? I hope not. Police will use time to manipulate behavior. You can park here these times a day. You can turn right these times of day. Entertainment is regulated by time. Concerts start at this time. Movies start at this time. Happy hour starts at this time. Why do they have happy hour? It's not just because they want to be happy at one point in time. It's more that they want to encourage business in a particular span. That's regulating behavior. You're more likely to go if the cost is going to be that much cheaper. You're likely to move in certain ways if there are legal restrictions against you moving in other ways. Your work is regulating your behavior, and all of this is largely about regulating behavior. You thought you were done with these in elementary school, huh? Afraid not. So, in order to understand this political framework, how we can use the framework of politics, of power, of someone benefiting and at someone's expense, we're going to need to apply a very specific lens. Yeah, I'm draping the metaphor on pretty heavily here, but it is one. And this lens is going to cause us to look a little bit at history. Man, history classes would be so much better if it was like this. Now, I got to give a little caveat here. The version of history I'm going to give you here is just that. It's my version. It is a very reductive version, an extraordinarily brief version, and probably a very incorrect version. It's a very Eurocentric version. Even though the things I'm talking about did happen in other places, I'm sticking with a standard Eurocentric construction because you've all experienced this in school. School is also pretty Eurocentric. So it's very limited, but it's going to cause us to look at some key principles. First, it's going to cause us to look back in time. The Middle Ages. The Middle Ages weren't a time of just all jousting and gorging and such. Most people in the Middle Ages were not knights. Most people were not jesters. Most people didn't get to do these things. Most people in the Middle Ages were farmers. They were serfs. They worked a small plot of land for someone else's benefit. They were only allowed to keep a small amount of it. Who benefited from their labor? Well, it was the people who owned the castle nearby, the lord, the duke, the king, whatever you want to call. They gave you a little plot of land to work on and let you keep a small amount of the food that you grew, and the rest had to go to them. Why? Well, few things. You gave your labor up so the person in the castle next door, if they decided to come and try to take your land, the person in the castle next to you would help defend you. But there was a deeper version of what was going on. You needed lots of people to make food, and those people, if they were kept away from power, it meant the power got concentrated in a very small amount of hands. And the people whose hands power got concentrated in, people like the king, came up with a system for justifying their existence at the top. A king was appointed by divine right. Kings ruled by divine right. And the original model of kingship was you are God's representative on earth. Why do the poor people not just take their pitchforks and such, kill the king, and run the land themselves? Well, they'd be killing God's representative. It's a neat little ideology that subjugates a whole lot of people and does that for the benefit of a very few people. But you needed lots of people to work the land because technology wasn't that good. As people learned more, they learned about things like crop rotation. They learned about varying the types of plants they're using. New technology came in. Plows. Oxen-driven plows. More understanding about what grew where and how to not totally denude the land of all vitamins and minerals and all the good stuff plants need to live. And eventually you got to a point, which we will call the Renaissance for no apparent reason here, where you didn't need everybody to do farming. If you were a farmer, your kid wasn't necessarily going to have to be a farmer because you didn't need 98% of the population farming anymore. Other jobs started to crop up, like carpenter, potter, baker, all kinds of specialized little occupations. There was class mobility. You weren't stuck where you were born. In the Middle Ages, if you were born poor, you're going to die poor. If you're a king, your kids is going to be the king. This is just how things worked. But the move to the Renaissance, very reductive version, meant that there was job mobility. People could move because technology allowed people to streamline production and build more stuff. You needed less people farming to get enough food, so you could have these people also use technology and start to develop any number of other things which would help improve someone's life. Then came the industrial age. As I said, this is very, very reductive here. And technology kept increasing to the point where we could automate tasks. You don't have to have a carpenter build your chair from scratch, every aspect of it. No, you hire a bunch of people, have them do a tiny little portion of it. You're going to cut the wood down into these little logs. You're going to take these logs and cut them down into planks. You're going to take the planks and cut them down to the proper size pieces. And with the help of technology, you could take a few people, have them each do a tiny little bit of the task, and produce lots of goods. There was a change, though, in the move from the Renaissance to the Industrial Revolution, in that what it meant to be a worker really started to plummet. It started to mean something that was less and less important. In the Renaissance, a carpenter did all the carpenting. They did all the building. They did all the wood stuff. They oversaw every aspect of making stuff. In a factory that made chairs in the Industrial Revolution, the workers were valuable because they were a giant mass of people, and if you could break the task down small enough, lots of people could go along and produce lots of goods. But each individual job was kind of boring and depressing. This is because this is how the assembly line process works. You break down something into a bunch of little tasks. Each task you don't have to train someone very hard at, and you can get really good at your one tiny little task. Does that work very fun? No. It's boring. It's horrible. It's awful. But from the point of view of the factory owners, that's a really good thing because you don't have to train anyone heavy to do that. It makes your training costs very small, and that means you don't have to value these employees very much, and you can pay them, in fact, very little. Factory owners ran the big factories. They didn't actually go in and run the stuff themselves, but they owned everything. And what does a factory owner want more than anything else in the world? If you said money, ding, 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 you're right. They would do everything they could do to maximize the amount of money coming in. What does the factory worker want more than anything else in the world? If you said money, ding, 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 you're right. Why would you do a horrible factory job if not for your desperate need for money? Money drove you to do awful work. So, if the factory owners want money more than anything else, and if the factory workers wanted money more than anything else, do you think they're ever going to get along? This theory says no, because they both want the exact same thing. And if two sides want the exact same thing, they're not going to go out of their way to make sure the other side gets what they want. If I'm a factory owner, do I worry a lot about worker safety? No, because worker safety costs me money, and the more money I spend making my factory safe for my workers, the less I'm going to have. Do factory owners want a very smart, educated populace? No, if I'm a factory owner, I don't want people to be highly intelligent, because if they're highly intelligent, they're not going to take pennies for working in my factory. It goes on and on like this. Factory owners are going to do everything they can to keep the costs as low as humanly possible. And the factory workers, who need money more than anything else, are going to be the victims of all the cost-cutting measures that the factory owners do. So factory workers are going to be very oppressed. And eventually, you would think that maybe things might come to a head between these two people. Now, who was the person who did a lot of thinking on this? If you answered the guy with the big hefty beard named Karl Marx, you got it in one. What did Marx believe? Well, hold on just 1 second, and you're going to learn.
Karl Marx on alienation. Karl Marx believed that work, at its best, is what makes us human. It fulfills our species' essence, as he put it. Work allows us to live, to be creative, to flourish. However, the reality in 19th century Europe was that work destroyed workers, particularly those who had nothing to sell but their labor. To the mill and factory owners, a worker was simply an abstract idea with a stomach that needed to be filled. The workers had no choice but to toil long hours for a pitiful wage. What was worse, their labor alienated them. Alienation is a disorienting sense of exclusion and separation. Factory labor, under capitalism, alienated the workers from the product of their labor. They made stuff they couldn't afford to buy, which disappeared to shops in far-off places, to make money for people who paid them next to nothing. The factory production line split jobs into meaningless tasks that made the hours at work tedious, empty and bleak. They became cogs in a gigantic machine. Workers lived for the few hours at home when they could eat, sleep and relax. The rest of the time, they weren't fully alive. This work also alienated them from each other. The only way out of this drudgery, Marx argued, was for the workers to organize and revolt. They needed to seize the means of production, leading to his famous rallying cry, "Workers of the world, unite! You have nothing to lose but your chains."
There are some problems with this particular view of capitalism. It does a lot to explain how things were at the very beginning of the Industrial Revolution and the rise of the factories, but it doesn't fully explain everything that can happen. There are difficulties. The first difficulty being, do factory owners actually hang out in their factory a whole lot? No. They hire people just to run the factory for them so they don't have to step foot around the dirty factory workers. And that means we have a whole new group of people, not just workers and owners, we have middle managers. The job of the middle manager is just to make sure that the workers do what the factory owner wants them to do. Seen in this light, middle management doesn't actually make anything. They don't actually do anything. They just make sure everybody's talking to each other. They only get paid more as a sign of power, a symbol of power, but they're actually less valuable to the process than anyone else. Another problem with Marx's original conception is that everybody doesn't work in factories. There are people who aren't employed anymore. When people get to retirement age, do we just shove them out on an ice floe and let the polar bears take them? No, as a society, we kind of don't like that. Some people like it less than others. So we take care of them. We also do the same with homeless people. We tend not to let them starve right away. We also have another problem with Marx's conception in that he didn't have the level of technology that we have. For Marx, technology was relatively simple. With computers and such nowadays, most people don't make anything at all, even if they work in very drudgery-based jobs. Instead, you're manipulating numbers, you're manipulating files, you're manipulating information and knowledge. As a teacher, I don't really make anything. My job is about moving knowledge around. So the whole factory owners own the factory and factory workers make stuff there doesn't apply to everybody because, well, not everybody makes stuff. But what Marx does a very good job of doing is giving us a structure for how society works. In a Marxist society, there are very clear distinctions between upper class, middle class, lower class. There is a hierarchy at work in society. And the higher you go, the more power you get with the rulers, the kings, or whatever, but the less they actually produce. The masses who do the majority of the work have the least amount of power. Another advantage for Marxist theory is that it forces you to ask a question. Whenever you analyze anything, Marxist theory forces you to ask who benefits from things the way they are. The fat cats, usually. I'd be afraid of this guy. Certain people will always benefit. In a certain way, doing Marxist theory is like going on a giant game of follow the money, find out who's behind things, which might sound a little bit paranoid to some people, but for someone who's writing and analyzing stuff, which is what y'all are going to be doing, it's a decent approach because it always gives you questions to ask, and it always puts you on a search for answers. Looking at something from a Marxist point of view and asking that question, who benefits from things the way they are, gives you something to do. As someone who's analyzing stuff, you always want something to do. That's your job. And that's hopefully what Marx can give you. Now, I want to be absolutely perfectly clear about this. I am not suggesting you become a Marxist. Not a lot of future in that. So please don't report me to anyone. But the point of view that you follow the money, follow the question, who benefits from this, can do a lot for you analytically. If you're always looking for someone at the root, if you're always looking for a cause, that will give you a lot more to go on than if you're just, I wonder what happens. Marxism is a generalized approach as much as anything else. And at least that's how you should think about it. Even if you want to forget all the stuff about factory owners and exploitations, the simple question, who benefits from this behavior, can give you a lot of places to go as an analyst. And that's kind of what we want, isn't it? Have a good time. See you in the next video. Bye.